with and studied with. Yeah, take a look. Look. I'm not saying he doesn't outline the need for experience, am I? I'm saying it is not obvious to me, it might be obvious to someone else, to find sections in there where he's volunteering that this material came out of my own experience.
I see. So he's not volunteering that. The question is whether that occurred. I've always assumed that that level of misunderstanding is combined with experience.
Yeah, well, look, I'm not suggesting you give up your assumption.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, next time you go through it, keep that in mind and see whether you can make this kind of a distinction. See, especially if you're thinking about the Proclus' commentary on the Parmenides, a good part of his commentary on Parmenides is line by line by line by line. And the question is, what is he bringing to that what is he bringing to each one of those lines to open it up and to make a comment on it? Does that come out of his own experience? Does it come out of Saronikus? Does it come out of the earlier thinkers? And there's a whole set of earlier thinkers he uses. Because part of the game of scholarship is to be able to identify earlier thinkers and to master those so you can, as it were, stand at the top of that and make statements about something that came earlier. And that's one of the goals. It's a legitimate goal. It's the second method.
When Proclus writes about the arche of light, is that based upon commentary on the section in Plato, or is he saying this is how things are?
Well, you see, now you moved from the Parmenides to the theology of Plato.
Oh, is it?
Yeah.
I thought that was in the commentary.
Well, that's where a great whole section is on the procession of light. All right, okay. Again, we're back with the same question, all right? Watch. How can we conclude that some section is the result of the author's personal experience rather than the result of working with previous thinkers and their writings to make the points he made? Now,
To truly conclude, he would have to say it, I suppose, but it seems obvious to me that he has that kind of understanding when I read his work. I mean, in the introductory invocations to the theology of Plato and the commentary on Plato's Parmenides, he exhorts that the gods enkindle a light of truth inside of his soul, right? That's true.
no doubt.
But I mean, he doesn't say that it's happened, but he does ask them to do that.
That's right. And that's why I made a separation between that kind of thinker and Plotinus, who very clearly does make that statement. Now, as far as we're concerned, all right, if we could find some examples of Proclus' work that does come out of his experience, what we'd simply do is say, part of Proclus is here and part of Proclus is in the third section. We put his name down here. Perfectly all right. There's nothing, as far as what I'm doing, that would exclude that. But insofar as we know he does quote previous thinkers and shapes his vision from those thinkers, since that's what he tells us, to that degree he belongs here. And I'm certainly not excluding if you do find some rich quotes that suggest that, put them in both.
Yeah, I would agree. I thought of the prayer at the beginning of Parmenides' commentary.
Yeah, okay, well, find them and we'll break them into two. All right, we'll break them into two. All right, now, Hot 24 fragments, we pulled out about a third of them. Right? We structured them in the way in which we did in order to justify the claim that there is a wisdom of Heraclitus that fits in, is consistent with what we later called the Platonic tradition. Therefore, I would rather call it not the Platonic tradition, but the Hellenic tradition. Now, the difficulty with that, let me make it very clear, and for that I'll even get a different color. there may be some Hellenics who do not participate in that.
Like
What
Aristotle?
does that mean?
Like Aristotle?
And Aristotle may be one. Since many of the thinkers do, we can say very clearly that there is a Hellenic tradition in which we will clearly put our friend Heraclitus, as we did with our other thinkers, and especially now when we go into Empedocles next time, he'll fit in the Hellenic tradition. We're going to do the same thing, make another test as we proceed, because if we can shake loose our tie to this gentleman Aristotle and using him as a basis for understanding, then it opens up the fact that Plato was not unique, Socrates was not unique. There was something going on in the tradition. And that takes participation in, an experience of, and it's still possible to get into it, because that's something that is there. Thank you.
Maybe Aristotle was not in the Hellenic tradition. We call it the Aristotelian tradition. Developed it.
Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Do it again, just run it real quick.
Sure.
Just a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
If there is a wisdom tradition in Heraclitus, right, we have to find it. Because we have been the heirs of an Aristotelian tradition. The difficulty with that is that there are only 124 fragments. The ratio is 1 to 3, sometimes 1 to 4 on these issues. And if you only focus on the negative side, then you have a distorted view of Heraclitus. He does, however, deal both in his style and his content with opposites. And when he does make these differences, they're in sharp contrast. We then talked about 3 methods of the hermeneutical method. Right, 1, 2, 3. Making clear that when we're dealing with Heraclitus, depending upon which one you use, you're going to come to it with a different understanding. I started with the processes in nature because nearly all of Aristotle is in this realm, and I wanted to show that he does explore this realm, even though there are some things he misses, right? But nonetheless, he does represent a good part of it, right? The question then is, does he remain faithful to the other levels of Heraclitus, such as that there's something behind nature, in that great expression, nature loves to hide, and all is one. And if so, there must be something behind all of this strife that can bring about a oneness. And what is that? Right? Because we can see that the idea of fire is a transformation through the elements. Right? So therefore we must have to try to look for that rationality that moves from the many and strife into oneness. That's the Logos. The Logos is what he calls eternally valid, and everything flows from it, and everything comes to pass in accordance with the Logos. He contrasts his own view with that of the many. He calls the many asleep, and he says they believe they have a private intelligence of their own, and even though they're intimately connected with this Logos, they act as if they had no experience of it. His way of reflecting on things is such that he says that my own method I practiced on myself, I searched myself, and I have 2 ways of proceeding with my method. One is that I try to study the nature of each thing and specify how it behaves. If he's going to specify how he behaves, surely then he must rely upon the senses, the eyes especially, which he must treasure above all. But he also says, apart from eyes and ears, he treasures most often learning as central and highest of it all. Right? And therefore he seeks to reach for this truth behind things. Well, if you do have this Logos, what does that depend upon? Does it stop there? Does he go behind it? He says, good heavens, there's a hidden harmony. You have to discover it. Right? And if you do, then you'll discover the intelligence behind which the Logos functions and by which all things are stirred through all things. Remember this beautiful diagram I drew? I was impressed by it myself. Then on the other side, as he goes